Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Diatone Mamba F4 AIO, or all-in-one. This is another hoop board, this time from Diatone. You may know that brand. They're quite prevalent in the quad scene. They may be prevalent in other scenes that I'm not familiar with because, you know, I only do quads. But this is a new product that they're launching. Pretty straightforward. What we don't see is really much of a difference from other boards. So let's look at this very quickly. Of course, you've got your battery minus and plus, so that's your black wire, that's your red wire. You've got your 5-volt VCC. Now that's a difference there. Now on the GNB boards, they changed their wiring to where if you can go 5-volt here, but you need to go ground off of that pad, and these pads are different on the GNB board. This is minus and this is plus on the GNB. So you can go video, you can get your battery voltage from this pad rather than having to go over here. Then I presume you can also use the ground that's right next to it. Most of the time our micro VTXs will use 5 volts though, so you probably go here and there, and then you've got your video in, which is just represented by the in, and then your video out. We've also have our UART down here for smart audio purposes. Up top we've got TX1, RX1 extra UARTs, 3.3 volt for our Spectrum satellite friends out there. S-Bus, 5-volt ground, LED. We've got our beeper pads for battery minus and plus. You can see the B plus is over there. I point that out because I missed that my first time around, had to re-record. And I also noticed that we have some solder over here on the pads. I wonder if these come out of the factory pre-tinned ready for connectors, because the connectors do not come in the bag, which I'll show you. Here's our baggie of goodies. You see we get plenty of soft mounting. Actually, 2 different sizes of soft mounting. There's one right here that's real small, and we've got a thicker type here. We've also got a capacitor. I'll get that capacitor out and we'll show it to you real quick. We also have our XT30 there. Now we don't have any wire, so you're going to need to furnish that wire yourself to be able to connect a battery to this board. I do appreciate the fact that because you buy this board, you're probably going to be doing some soldering of some sort, and when it doesn't have the wire already soldered in, that gives you the option of where you want the wires coming out, from this side or from this side, depending upon how you choose to mount it. Because even if you have it this way, if you're using connectors, there's the possibility it might be remote that your connectors might need to be up top, or you want to be able to get at the solder pads real easy, so you might go on top. You might want to flip it upside down, depending upon the frame, and if it has a USB port that is accessible to you through the bottom or not. Something I found interesting also about this was that nowhere on the board that I see, we have our little arrow, tells us which way is forward, so this is the top of the board, and that's the front. But I don't see where it has Diatone printed on it at all. And I find that a little bit odd, because most of the time when companies produce one of these, they do try to get their name on it somewhere, but I'm not seeing it. Hopefully, as I've rotated it here slowly, you've been able to get a good look at all the components. You can see we've also got our labeling for our motors. So if you do flip this around, you may have to do some motor mapping to make sure. Sorry about the batteries. That's just my little studio here. Studio, it's a desk. Anywho, so if you flip this board over, you may find that you have to map motors through the CLI in Betaflight. That's a quick look at the board. Also the boot button, that can be important for flashing. That can help you get it into DFU mode if for some reason your computer in USB doesn't like to put the board in DFU mode when you click that button to flash through Betaflight. One thing I haven't done in the past, I want to do this time, is I wanted to weigh these boards just to see if there's any real difference between them. But before we get to that, here's a look at the capacitor. It's a 25 volt, 220 microfarad capacitor. It's not very big, it's just kind of round. I actually prefer the ones that are a little bit less in diameter and a little bit longer, because they heat shrink nicely to the XT30 or to the wires a little bit better. This seems to be probably more than enough. Of course, this dotted line indicates that your negative side, so your black or your battery negative, goes over here. I told you we'd take a look at it, now we have. I should also mention it comes in a package that it's kind of got that bubble wrap on the inside of it to help protect it, and it does come in a static bag, and they have a little QR code here where it takes you to the instructions, which I've actually got set up on my computer here, and it's got a nice little diagram or layout. Many people who have been building don't need that, but if it's your first couple of go-rounds, that could be handy. The Diatone Mamba board weighs 5.15 grams. The GNB board weighs just over 5.5 grams, but that one has the connectors on it. The Nameless RC board weighs just under 7 grams, but it does have the XT30 heat shrink and some wire on there, so we would want to subtract 2.38 grams to keep the playing field level. And the Pyro Drone board weighs just about 6.25 grams. Again, we need to subtract about 2.3 grams off of that to get a good comparison with the Mamba and the GNB board. I have the Beta FPV board in a build already, so I cannot weigh that for you, unfortunately, because I only got one for review. And just because we talked about this online, the Pyrodrome board itself functions very well. The problem with it is these pads. They're very, very close together. You can see that my tip in here, and this is a 1.3 millimeter hex head screwdriver. They're very, very small. That is some pretty serious challenges in soldering, so that's the one reason why I don't recommend this board. If they just made those, I know with, you know, trying to make them work with connectors, I think they needed to have pads out here a little bit to make the board just a touch bigger to give us some sizable pads to solder to. I have done it. If you're using Diatone Mamba motors, I don't suggest doing that because I had to actually go around my motors more than once in order to make sure I didn't have a short, because the first 2 times, maybe even 3 times, I had a short where my solder was touching between the motor wires. You're better off going with like the Apex motors that have really thin wires, or the AMAX motors that have really thin wires. That gives you a fighting chance of avoiding that problem that I had. This is a bit of a comparison of the solder pads that you'll be using, and you can get a little bit of a comparison between the Mamba board on top and the GNB board underneath. If you've made it all the way here, you're probably wondering, what's the difference between all these boards? Well, the one spec that Mamba kind of sticks out at me is the fact that they have their own Betaflight target. They're not piggybacking off of a Maytech target or anything like that, so you may see that as a bonus there. And it's also a 13 amp board, so you get a little bit more ESC, and the burst rating is for 15 amps, and that's for 10 seconds. That's what has been reported in the field. We would have to find out if that holds true or not, but that is the one spec that I can actually tell you makes this board a little bit different than some of the other boards, is that burst rating and the standard 13 amp for the ESC rating. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.